Alright, welcome back to the shop, guys. On the workbench today we've got a cutaway case. We're going to be talking about doing the Hoover mods. We got a motor that's going to Pennsylvania today, and so we're going to do the Hoover mods on that case. But before we do that, we're going to talk through what they are, because I know there's been a lot of questions about what the Hoover mods are, where they came from, and all that. So back in the mid to late 50s, Bob Hoover and his buddies were doing endurance races in air-cooled Volkswagen motors. And they kept breaking rocker shafts, in particular on the 1-2 side of the case. They started doing an evaluation of the oiling system on this thing, thinking that maybe they weren't getting enough oil to that side of the case. And what they determined was that all of the oil that goes to the 1-2 side of the case travels there through this little passage around the center cam bearing web and then through the matching gallery on the other side before it heads out to the heads. There's a couple of other issues, but what we're going to do is we're going to hog this guy out, and then on the other side of the case, well, we've got another case on the bench here, we'll show you, we're going to connect a couple of oil galleries so that we allow oil to go through this one into the other side of the case as well. So we're going to wind up getting something around 8 times the amount of oil out to the heads than you get with a stock factory case. That's going to do a whole bunch for us, but the biggest thing is it's going to carry a ton of heat away. One of the things that people talk about these things as being air cooled, well, that's only half the story. The other half is they're oil cooled, right? You've got an oil cooler on these things, and that's carrying a lot of the heat away from the heads. So we're going to try to get as much oil out to the heads as we can in order to carry as much heat away as we can. So your oil temperatures are going to go up, not by a significant amount, but your head temperatures are going to go way, way down. Okay, so before we get into how to do these Hoover mods, I wanted to talk about a little bit about how the oil actually flows through the case, because this is kind of a mystery to some people. You can look at diagrams all you want, but this cutaway actually does a much, much better job of showing how the oil travels through the case. So for starters, it comes out of the pump. When you full flow it, obviously you want to drill and tap this gallery here so that oil can't come out the pump. You got to make sure you tap not only the gallery itself, but the pump body, because otherwise when the engine gets hot at idle, you can have oil leak through here, whether it comes down this gallery and in or out the pump and in. Oil will leak past this joint here, and you'll get a flickering oil pressure light in your dash. So make sure to plug both sides. So with a full flow, the oil comes in this side of the gallery here, and there's a pressure relief valve here, and this spring tension is critical. If you don't get that spring tension correct, your oil pressure will either be low or high. Excuse me, not the pressure. Your oil will bypass the cooler at too high or too low of a pressure, and your engine either will never warm up or it'll run too hot. So you got to make sure you get this spring tension correct, and there's specs in the book. I forget what it is, but we measure those with every engine that we build. So this will allow oil to bypass the cooler. So as this plunger is high, oil is forced to go through the cooler. This plunger is only high when the pressure is below, it's roughly around 40 pounds. So oil comes up, goes through the cooler, comes back down and into the main gallery. And it's probably hard to see, but there are little drillings here that allow the oil to go up into the main galleries, up into the main bearings, or down into the cam bearing webs, depending on which drilling you're talking about. On a dual relief case, there's also a pressure relief valve at the back, so that prevents oil from over-pressurizing this main gallery. And so if oil gets too high, this pressure relief valve goes down and oil is dumped right back into the oil sump. So it helps to prevent over-pressurizing the system once it gets past the cooler. We like to use pressure relief pump cover so that you can't overpressurize your filter and your cooler. So it actually prevents overpressurizing the system before it gets to the stock pressure relief valve. Okay, so we got mixed case up on the bench now. We've already bored and decked the cylinder surfaces on this guy. We have drilled and tapped all of the oil galleries, including the full flow fitting. And so what we're going to do today is we are going to connect, there's a gallery that goes through the case from the back, goes through these 3 lifters, and then stops right here. So we're going to continue that gallery across to here, and then drill this gallery down so that the two intersect, and that will allow oil to get to the 1-2 side of the case through not only the center cam bearing web but also through the rear cam bearing web. All right, so sitting on the bench here, we've got the tools that you need to do this. Obviously, there's only 2 drill bits on the bench. Don't let that fool you. It is a simple process, but if you let Crooks VW do this, he could really, really screw up your case. Not every case has enough material to do this process. And if you drill through the side of your case, it can cause some headaches. Obviously, you'd have to do some work to get it fixed because you'll have a major oil leak if you don't. We've seen a couple of them go bad. One we did, and one was done by another machine shop in Southern California. Both were fixable, but it took some work. So we're going to extend the oil gallery that's behind the drill bit here. We're going to extend it from roughly here to roughly here somewhere. And the problem is this deep sump here, or this deep recess, I guess, if it's too deep inside the case, or the gallery is drilled at just the wrong angle, we've drilled through down in here, and it's really hard to get a TIG welder torch down in there to fill it up. In that case, what you have to do is cut the top off of another case that's just the right shape to weld in right here. That takes enough heat that if you do that, you're going to wind up warping the line bore, and you're going to have to reline bore the case. So it's not a lot of fun. The other thing that can happen is you can actually drill through the side of the case right here. It's real easy to get a TIG torch in there, and it's super easy to fix that one. But again, Crooks VW probably isn't going to have a TIG torch and magnesium rod to fill it. So if this isn't something you're super comfortable doing, send it to us and we'll do it. It's not a significant charge. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out how far we have to drill this thing. Each case is a little bit different, so I'm going to lay the drill bit in there so that the tip of the drill bit is just past the center of the cam bearing web. And then I'm going to grab a Sharpie and I'm going to mark the end of the drill bit. Okay, so we're going to drill through to there. Okay, so we know we got to go that deep. Now the problem is, I marked it at the cam bearing and we're in an inch or so from this cam bearing web. So I got a couple of choices. This doesn't have to be super exact, so what I can do is just line of sight right down the cam bearing as I drill it, which is probably what I'll do. The other thing you can do is you can actually measure the distance between here and here and then remark your drill bit. I like to just eyeball it because it's close enough. Okay, now, one more word of warning before you get started on this. You are drilling magnesium. Make sure you use coolant. I've never caught one on fire with a drill bit before, but I also am not responsible if you do it yourself. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we've got the case up on the mill now because we don't have a good starting point to get this drill bit running straight like we did with the first drilling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out how deep I need to go so I don't have to do this by feel. I've got the drill bit that we just used to extend the first gallery down in the lifter bore itself. So what I'm going to do is move the mill over. And I'm going to run down until I hit that drill bit. And I'm going to zero that out on the DRO. So now I know I need to go that deep plus about 1/4 of an inch. By the way, I didn't mention before this long drill bit that's in there. That's a 7/32 by 12-inch long drill bit. You can buy those anywhere online. Okay, so I'll move back over, and this one that I've got in the chuck now is, I believe it's 1/4 inch. Okay, so now I just need to drill this guy out until we hit about 1/4 of an inch. Let's see, let's get this guy going. Okay, now again, you should be using coolant on this. Just because we're filming, I'm not going to use coolant on this. I'll just take it nice and slow. Make sure to clear the bit. But if you catch your case on fire, don't come crying to me. Okay, so we have the case back up on the bench now. I've got the drill bit shoved down inside there. You can see the drill bit spinning, so we know we connected the two galleries properly. You can see, if I pull the drill bit back out, you can see we did not drill through the web here, so we're safe there. We didn't come back through the end, so we're good there. If we flip it over, we did not drill through the side of the case here either. So this case was good. Okay, so now we've got the case up on the engine stand. We only have it here just to help hold it, so we're not trying to work with three hands to do this. What we're going to do is we're going to carve this center cam bearing web. We're going to carve the oil gallery out a little bit. I like to try to double the size, or maybe even a little bit more. What's going to happen is, now that we have extended the drillings in this side of the case, this cam bearing web is going to service this lobe, and half of this lobe. And this lobe, and then half of this one. And this drilling is going to service this half. So we need to get double the oil out of this guy that we get out of this one. So I'm just going to use a carbide burr. Nice fat tipped aluminum carbide burr. And we're just going to hog this guy out. Safety first. Make sure you use your glasses. Okay, so this guy's all done. You can see what I did here is I just made these slots a little bit wider. I didn't really go any deeper. I just made it wider. The other thing that I did is I radiused these corners a little bit to make it easier for the oil to turn that quick corner. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but there's a radius right here to make it easier for the oil to come from this drilling into the back side of the cam bearing web. We're going to do the same thing on the other side of the case so that everything matches up both sides of the case, and we'll get plenty of oil through this center cam bearing web. So as you can see, we've got both center cam bearing webs hogged out on this case. That's it for the machine work on the case itself. This is where a lot of people stop, and that's not enough. There's several other steps that we need to take. This case is actually going to get a set of the performance style ratio rockers where the adjuster is on the push rod rather than on the valve. So there's a little bit less work to do on this case because of that, but there's a little trick that we like to use that we'll get to in a little bit. First thing we got to do though is we got to deal with the lifters. The way these lifters work is there's these two rings and this little drilling. This little hole is what allows oil to get into the push rod. Well, the problem is this ring and this hole only line up with the gallery within inside the lifter bore when the push rod cam has actually actuated the lifter and pushed it in. And that's about 8% of the time. So 92% of the time you have no oil going through that push rod and out to the head. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to grind 3 little grooves in this band between the 2 grooves of the lifter in order to allow oil to travel from this one, which lines up with the gallery all the time, to this one, which only lines up when the cam has actuated the lifter. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and cut these little grooves. We're going to do that with a little pencil grinder and a diamond wheel. We're going to cut the grooves at a slight angle because, don't forget, these lifters rotate because of how they're positioned on the cam. And these little grooves, when we cut them at an angle, that's going to help ensure the rotation. So what I like to do is start where the hole is and put one off to this side and one off to that side so that I don't wind up putting a groove right at the hole. I don't think it really matters, but I like to do it anyway. So I'll go ahead and turn the torch on. You want the groove to go this direction. Just like that. Okay, so all we want to do is cut the groove about as deep as these 2 bands are and about a 1/16 of an inch wide, maybe an 1/8. Okay, it's not super critical. We're going to do 2 more, and we got to do all 16 lifters. Excuse me, all 8 lifters. Okay, now that we're done grinding all 8 of these guys, we're going to take a sanding drum on the pencil grinder, and we're just going to go through and deburr them real quick so we don't leave any burrs, wear out your lifter bores. All right, so this is where we're going to differ just a little bit from what Bob Hoover did. When Bob Hoover was doing this stuff, we didn't have these performance-style rockers where the adjuster is on the push rod itself. Bob went through some pretty extreme measures. I agree with a lot of what he did, and I do it when we use the stock-style rockers. But we're going to concentrate on the ratio styles today. What we're going to do is we're going to try to get the oil that has been used on the rocker itself, when it comes out the edges, we're going to try to get it to squirt up on the springs. And so what we're going to do is take and cut a little notch right there with the pencil torch. Okay, so I meant pencil grinder, not pencil torch. We're not TIG welding here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find where, if you look at the rocker, it's angled across. I want the side where the push style, or the push, whatever the hell you call this thing, the pad is. And I'm going to cut on that side because I want the oil to spray out of here and up onto the springs and the stems and get as much of this heat out of here as I can. There we go. Doesn't take much. Probably actually hard to see on the video. Alright, so that's the Hoover mods on an engine that has the performance style ratio rockers. If this is something you aren't comfortable doing yourself, give us a call. We can do it for you. Have a good day. Thanks for coming.